Karoline Leavitt launched a bombshell lawsuit against The View, and she's demanding a jaw-dropping $800 million in damages. Yes, that's right, $800 million. The news spread like wildfire, and suddenly everyone was talking. It all began when Karoline appeared live on the show.
Think how ironic that Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar and the rest of the ladies on The View spend their time calling Republicans the conspiracy theorists, but they have been wrong about everything they have said over the last couple of years.
Let me explain something to you, because without that wokeness, you might not have that job.
Expecting a real conversation, but instead of being treated like a guest, she was ambushed. The tone turned nasty fast, and what was supposed to be an interview turned into a televised takedown. Joy Behar didn't even try to hide her disdain. She rolled her eyes like a teenager at a school assembly and tossed sarcasm around like it was candy. Whoopi Goldberg went straight for the throat, dismissing Karoline's hard-earned success by calling it the product of privilege and wokeness. Sunny Hostin wasn't subtle either. She joined the attack, accusing Karoline of getting ahead just because of her background. It wasn't a discussion, it was a roast, and Karoline was the main course. But the hosts didn't know who they were dealing with. Karoline didn't react with anger or tears. She sat there with a calm smile, taking it all in. What the cameras didn't show was that she was memorizing everything, every side eye, every smug laugh, every cruel comment from the audience. She wasn't just enduring it, she was preparing for what came next. Once she walked off that set, the real show began. Karoline didn't throw a tantrum or storm out. She answered a few polite questions, gave a tight smile, and then got straight to work behind the scenes. What The View never expected was that Karoline's legal team was already on standby.
She's probably been put in there because, according to Donald Trump, she's a 10. You know that's what it is.
I want to be clear, though. It's not her first job. It was her first press briefing. She worked in the previous Trump administration.
They weren't scrambling. They were ready. They had clips. They had transcripts. They had notes, emails, Slack messages, even a chilling internal memo titled, "How to Throw Karoline Off Script." It was a setup from the start. Producers had planned every move like a reality TV ambush. They thought it would all be forgotten by the weekend. But Karoline had other plans. When ABC executives got a look at what her team had gathered, the blood drained from their faces. This wasn't just a legal complaint, it was an evidence bomb. Over 100 pages of receipts, video clips, screenshots, timestamps, word-for-word quotes from people behind the scenes. One exec reportedly muttered, "This is bad, really bad," and it got worse. A BC hoped this would quietly go away. Maybe they could toss out a half-hearted apology and move on. But Karoline wasn't after hush money. She wasn't looking for a quick check to make it stop. She wanted justice, and she wasn't backing down. ABC had no clue how deep this rabbit hole went. Discovery hadn't even started yet. That's the legal phase where both sides must reveal everything. Texts, emails, production documents, group chats. Nothing stays hidden.
President Trump's life echoed the sentiment that President Trump is a threat to democracy. And if you're a deranged lunatic and you're mentally ill, you will believe that lie. And yes, you will take political violence like we have seen in 2 instances against President Trump. Last week, Tim Walz and Kamala Harris said that everyone who showed up to President Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden was a Nazi. That's despicable, dangerous, divisive rhetoric that is spewed by the Democrat Party every single day.
Karoline's legal team wasn't playing games. They were coming for every crumb of evidence. That same damning memo about sabotaging her? It wasn't the only one. Other documents revealed a clear plan to derail Karoline during the live segment, and the network thought no one would ever find out. But they were wrong. So, then came the internal fallout. Whoopi Goldberg wasn't having it. She reportedly slammed her coffee mug on the table in a furious meeting, splashing coffee everywhere. "We're going to look weak," she snapped at the room. "Are we seriously negotiating with her?" Her voice shook with rage. She didn't care about the lawsuit. This was about her power, her legacy. She had built her image on being bold and untouchable. But this wasn't a protester or a politician she could ignore. This was a woman armed with evidence. Joy Behar wasn't far behind in her outrage. Furious, she ripped off her glasses and shouted, "We've carried this show for decades, through elections, through scandals, and now she's going to take us down?" The rage was real, but it was mixed with fear. Because for once, they weren't in control of the narrative. The power had shifted, and Karoline held the cards. Through it all, Sunny Hostin stayed quiet, until finally she spoke. Her voice was calm, but her words hit like thunder. "If we go to court and we lose," she said, "we're not just losing our jobs, we're losing our credibility." Suddenly, the room went silent. Because she was right. If the details of this setup went public, everything they'd hidden would be dragged into the light. And credibility? Once it's gone, you don't get it back. The very next morning, when The View aired live, everything felt different. The swagger, the laughter, the smugness. It had vanished. Whoopi sat stiffly, almost frozen. She wasn't cracking jokes or tossing out sass. Her tone was slow and almost cautious. "We want to have honest conversations," she said. "But we also want to be fair. And maybe we weren't." Her voice barely made it above a whisper. Joy Behar looked rattled. Her usual sharp tongue had dulled. She stared at the table and said in a shaky voice, "We're passionate, but that passion shouldn't hurt people. Maybe we crossed a line." It sounded like an apology, but it felt more like a warning. Sunny Hostin looked tired but serious. She turned to the camera and said, "Karoline, if you're watching, we hope there's a way forward. A better way to handle things." But it was too little, too late. The damage was already done. Viewers weren't buying it. It reeked of fear, not remorse. The apologies didn't feel sincere. They felt like survival tactics. And Karoline? She didn't say a word. She let the internet speak for her, and it did. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, every platform lit up like wildfire. People were sharing clips from the show, editing side-by-sides of Karoline's treatment versus the host's groveling apologies. The backlash was brutal, and it wasn't just social media. Advertisers started backing out. Sponsors were pulling the plug. The network felt the heat. Karoline's silence became her loudest weapon. No tweets, no press tours, no interviews. She let the world react, and it reacted with full force. The message was clear. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about accountability, about standing up to a media machine that had gotten away with too much for too long.
I would like this young lady this is her first job, I would like her to do a little homework. Because she said something yesterday that really pissed me off. And that was, she said, there will be no wokeness here.
Oh, yeah.
Let me explain something to you. Because without that wokeness, you might not have that job.
Yeah.
Because women were not invited to that table. Women were not invited to many tables in this nation. The reason we fought and busted our behinds to make sure that you didn't have to worry about this.
The impact was immediate. People weren't just angry, they were outraged. Clips of Karoline being mocked were now being dissected by thousands, frame by frame, with captions like, "Watch how Joy sneers here," and "Look at Whoopi's face when Karoline talks." It became more than just a moment. It became a movement. And then came the memes. The internet exploded with them. One viral post showed Whoopi nervously hiding behind a stack of cue cards labeled "Damage Control," while Karoline stood tall in front of a flaming folder labeled "Lawsuit." Another showed Joy Behar photoshopped into a courtroom sketch, drenched in sweat, while a judge slammed a gavel labeled "Accountability." The mood had shifted permanently. Karoline had turned what was meant to be a humiliation into a historic stand. She wasn't just defending herself, she was defending everyone who had ever been steamrolled by the mainstream media machine. And the public was cheering her on. Back at ABC, the panic was setting in. Executives were holding back-to-back meetings, trying to figure out how this got so out of hand. One insider even leaked that no one expected her to fight back like this. They thought she'd disappear quietly. But Karoline was just getting started. And now the fear wasn't just legal. It was financial. Advertisers were pulling millions in sponsorships. A primetime network show losing cash? That's a crisis. Every hour, someone new was backing away from the controversy, terrified of getting dragged down with the view. Inside the show, tensions were sky high. Crew members were whispering, producers were ducking calls, and nobody knew who to trust anymore. Some staffers began deleting old messages, while others were lawyering up fast. It wasn't just about Karoline anymore. It was about what else might be uncovered. And here's where things get even more shocking. Karoline's legal team wasn't stopping with just that one episode. They were digging into years of archives, old interviews, guest treatment patterns, production notes, everything. They wanted to prove that Karoline wasn't a one-time victim. She was part of a pattern. And that's when whispers began to swirl about other guests. Conservative voices who had left The View feeling ambushed, insulted, or deliberately disrespected. One anonymous source said, "She's opening the floodgates. Everyone's watching now." And they were? More people began speaking out, dropping hints that they too had been treated unfairly, but never thought they could do anything about it. Until now, Karoline had lit a match, and the whole building was starting to smoke. Suddenly, The View wasn't just a talk show. It was the center of a media firestorm. Every entertainment site, news blog, and political commentator was talking about it. Headlines screamed, "Karoline strikes back," and "TV titans tumble."
Divisive and disgusting speech that any president, certainly in my lifetime, has ever given. Not radical to want to have a strong border, a strong military, and to unleash the might of your own economy, not economies around the world. You know, we have seen cultural Marxism trickling its way through every institution in this country. The public school system, the higher education university system, Hollywood, big tech, the corrupt mainstream media that I fought against in President Trump's White House are indoctrinating my generation of Americans into hating our country, hating one another based on race and gender and sex and all of this other BS, quite frankly.
The hosts, once untouchable, now looked shaken, and Karoline? Still silent. Still calm. Her legal team issued a single statement. "We are not seeking a settlement. We are seeking justice." That line alone sent another shockwave through the industry. She wasn't bluffing. And ABC knew it. Behind closed doors, the network was crumbling. Legal teams were clashing with PR teams. Senior producers were pointing fingers. According to one report, Joy Behar even threatened to walk off the show if ABC didn't start fighting back, but others told her to sit down and keep quiet. Whoopi, once the queen of the panel, reportedly lost it again, banging her fist on the conference table and yelling, "I've survived worse." But even she couldn't deny that this was different. The usual tricks weren't working this time. And all the while, Karoline's team was expanding their strategy. Not just for court, but for public accountability. They were building a full campaign, complete with timelines, expert witnesses, and documented evidence of bias, hostility, and manipulation behind the scenes. One producer reportedly begged to be left out, claiming, "I didn't know it would go that far." But Karoline's lawyers weren't pulling punches. If you were involved, even just a little, they were coming for the receipts. What made things worse for The View was how quickly the public had turned. Ratings began to dip. Comment sections flooded with criticism. Loyal viewers were suddenly questioning everything, wondering if this beloved show had been hiding its true face all along. And the deeper Karoline's team dug, the worse it got. Allegations started stacking up. Not just about her segment, but about a culture of bullying behind the scenes. Anonymous crew members hinted at toxic behavior, favoritism, and secret memos targeting certain types of guests. It was no longer just a lawsuit. It was an expose in real time. A show built on female empowerment and honest conversations now looked like a trap for anyone who didn't fall in line. Karoline had not only shattered the illusion, she had flipped the script. As the investigation widened, ABC realized they were sitting on a ticking time bomb. Every day brought new leaks, fresh headlines, and even more public backlash. Executives scrambled to control the damage, but it was too late. The narrative had already slipped from their hands. Viewers weren't fooled anymore. They saw right through the nervous smiles and robotic apologies.
I don't care if he's pooped his pants. I don't care if he can't put a sentence together. Show me he can't do the job, and then I'll say, okay, maybe it's time to go.
The show's polished surface had cracked wide open, revealing something messy and mean underneath. Karoline hadn't just exposed their behavior, she had exposed their culture. Behind the cameras, panic turned into silence. No more bold statements from the hosts, no more sassy comebacks. Now, it was all whispers and damage control. Even Joy Behar, who never backed down from a fight, reportedly told staff, "I don't recognize this show anymore." Meanwhile, Karoline remained laser-focused. No interviews, no distraction. She let the storm swirl around her while her team kept building a mountain of evidence. And they weren't just prepping for court, they were documenting everything for the public to see. Then came the final blow. A viral document dump. Karoline's lawyers released carefully redacted screenshots, transcripts, and internal messages showing how producers had coordinated their attack plan. It hit the internet like a wrecking ball. Viewers were stunned. Fans felt betrayed. The same show that claimed to welcome all voices had planned to humiliate a guest before she even walked through the door. One user tweeted, "This isn't journalism, it's sabotage." And just like that, the court of public opinion made its ruling. Karoline was no longer just a guest on The View. She was a symbol of media pushback, of standing your ground, of refusing to be silenced, and people were rallying behind her by the millions. The fallout was brutal. ABC faced boycotts, advertisers vanished, staff morale collapsed. Even longtime fans began questioning whether the show could ever recover. An internal source claimed, "It feels like we're watching the end." Through it all, Karoline stood tall, with grace, determination, and iron will. She wasn't just suing a show, she was confronting a system that had grown too comfortable with its own power. Her $800 million lawsuit wasn't about greed. It was about making a statement so loud the whole industry had to listen. And now, as the case moves forward, one thing is clear. Karoline Leavitt isn't backing down. Not now, not ever. Whether it ends in court or on the front page, she's made her mark, and The View will never be the same again.